This video is sponsored by Crimson Manifesto and Kazekage. Shadows descend upon the serpent. What if Jiraiya adopted Naruto? Part 10. The trip back to the Leaf was quiet and quick. No one really had energy or desire to remain in the hot desert full of the sand that gave their dearly departed comrade his namesake. This mission was considered a failure in every way, save for the lack of casualties on their team. Naruto was obviously very distraught, while Sakura as a medic also felt a severe sense of loss on the front of Lady Chiyo and Gaara. Sasuke admittedly hadn't considered Gaara as much of his teammate when accepting this task, but with this being his first real major loss of a comrade in battle he has suffered since the massacre of his family, it would be impossible for him to stay completely cold to the despair around him. Nonetheless, he was still pulled forward by his underlying drive, and he sincerely hoped that Naruto was as well. Fu also seemed to be deep in thought about something, but she wasn't as overtly devastated as Naruto seemed to be about the failed mission. In fact, it seemed like she had already hardened her resolve about something. The final leg of the journey home followed the trend of solemn silence until the group finally arrived at the village gates, at which point they were instantly directed to the Hokage's tower in order to be debriefed after the mission. While they expected to see Jiraiya and possibly the third Hokage or Tsunade, it is instead a room full of the tense and stuffy village elders accompanied by Hiruzen Sarutobi, who seems to have convinced his old rival into a game of shogi to pass the time. As the highest ranked shinobi assigned to the mission, as well as recognizing the low likelihood of Naruto's current state of mind allowing him to be very vocal, Sasuke handles the report on the mission, being highly detailed where it came to the events of the Sasori battle and Lady Chiyo's instrumental aid in his defeat, as well as the secret learned as a reward for the heavily told fight. However, where Datara's defeat is concerned, he is only able to really speak on the end of the battle and parts he was present for, after a few helpful additions from Fu, who was motivated enough to reminisce over such a twisted person's demise if Naruto wasn't. Danzo grunts as he sees Hiruzen's strategy in their little game finally. He already couldn't focus on it well enough to play worth a damn. So instead, he stands as the former Hokage, Homura, and Kotaro take the time to praise the young Uchiha Jonin for bringing back a lead along with his team intact. Sasuke then suddenly finds the man walking down the small lineup that Sakura, Fu, Naruto, and he had made to present their report, and gives each a slow and admittedly intimidating gaze due to how cold and lifeless his expression was. He then berates each of Sasuke's teammates as completely incompetent, though centers most of his criticism around Naruto himself, causing the young Jinchuriki's head to begin hanging lower and lower. Danzo then extends his verbal lashing to the father as well, as it seemed nepotism was beginning to weaken their village. Then leaning down a bit to force Naruto to make eye contact, Danzo growls that it is a very dull and brittle weapon that Jiraiya had forged for the village. The Sannin Kage's fist impacts his desk hard enough to splinter the wood and cut his hand at the assertion, while Hiruzen quickly body flickers behind his student to rest a hand on his shoulder and force him back into his seat as he tried to mediate and rebuke Danzo for stirring the shit for lack of a better term. Just as suddenly though, Naruto turns his back on everyone and walks briskly out the door. Fu and Jiraiya both call out to him with the former nearly going after him, if not for Sasuke and Sakura advising her to give him some space. Jiraiya speaks up at this point, once again seeing the need to set some boundaries with his sensei's contemporary. But it is clear the Leaf Shadow won't even give him the respect of facing and listening to him this time, as he once again faces Sasuke and boasts that he seemed to be the only one of the lot worth the time that village has put into him. As the former commander of the Anbu Black Ops, he declares the brother of Itachi will have a bright future ahead of himself, if he can keep his nose clean. Sasuke, for his credit however, maintains a completely straight poker face and merely bows his head and thanks his quote-unquote superior for the kind words. Danzo then smirks at the discord he's sown and leaves the room himself, as nothing more can be accomplished with his straightforward prodding. Homura and Kotaro, now feeling very unwanted by everyone in the room for not pushing back against any of that, make their way after him as Jiraiya throws his hat into the desk and drags his hands down his face as he asks his sensei how he dealt with that guy for all these decades. Hiruzen lets out a dry laugh that seems to hide more pain than humor as he responds that it probably took a few years off his life for the stress Danzo introduced alone. But he then reminds the new Hokage that it is unbecoming of his position to falter in front of his subordinates. Jiraiya agrees and then apologizes to the remnants of the now disbanded Team Naruto, as well as thanking them for their hard work as he looks to Fu with sympathy for what only he and Naruto are aware she has also been through today. He dismisses them all with the promise of time off, only for Sasuke to ask for a word alone with the new Kage. Jiraiya agrees to this, but states that Sarutobi Sensei will remain in the room since he's doing a bit of training of his own with the old man. Sasuke is fine with these terms, and nods to Sakura and Fu, cueing them to go ahead and step out, even though they very obviously don't want to. He then graciously declines the offer for downtime before making a request to be placed on the now upcoming Tenchi Bridge mission. This causes both Jiraiya and Hiruzen to harden their faces and deny this request outright, as they really don't want Sasuke involved with anything revolving around Orochimaru, especially after this last mission. However, Sasuke respectfully counters that he doesn't want to attempt this mission as a Jonin. He wants to go as an Anbu, citing the fact that from Sasori's description the best possible move would be to capture this spy and return him to the village for interrogation. Jiraiya agrees to this, but then states that a more seasoned team of Anbu or even Sennin Kakashi would be smarter. Sasuke grimaces and swallows the bile that rose in his throat at the thought of his last-ditch effort to get himself on this mission, as he reminds the former and current Hokage of the compliment he just received from the former head of the Anbu Black Ops. He then promises that he will not disappoint in this assignment. Jiraiya stares Sasuke down for a long while, partly because he can't believe how much this quiet and reserved boy reminds him of his own child. With a sigh, he asks the raven-haired youth to answer a question for him. Give an answer that he likes, and Sasuke will be allowed to go on the mission and serve under a commanding officer of Jiraiya's choice. Seeing a nod of agreement, he inquires why Sasuke wants anything to do with Orochimaru. Without hesitation, the Uchiha responds that Orochimaru is simply a stepping stone towards his real ambition. When asked what that is, Sasuke smoothly compartmentalizes that his ambition is the safety and prosperity of his home and those precious to him. The 5th Hokage sighs once again, as he can tell that isn't the whole story, and can nearly feel the effects of his position aging him already as he relents and tells the young shinobi to go and get some rest, specifying to Sasuke that he needs to be ready the next day and to remember Black Ops protocol. He also realized that if Anko gets wind of any of this, then it's very likely she wants to attend the mission as well, and that was a definite no-go. So he also specifies to keep this pretty hush-hush. Sasuke bows in thanks and leaves the office, and as soon as he's out of there, both Sakura and Fu, having waited for him, begin to fume over everything Danzo had said to them as they exit the tower together. Sasuke tells them to let it go, only to have Sakura look at him a bit worried and pat his shoulder while stating he should take his own advice, as she reveals that he hadn't even realized his Sharingan had activated out of irritation. A bit embarrassed, he apologizes as Fu looks off in the direction of the Hokage monument and wonders if Naruto is going to be okay, as she truly is worried. Her friends second this, but Sasuke cuts in that the knucklehead is one of the toughest people he knows, especially when it comes to setbacks and tragedies. Fu reminds, however, that Sasuke and Sakura have technically spent less time with their friend than she has, and not seeing him like this ever before made a drastic shift in demeanor fairly shocking to her. Though with the loss of another fellow jinchuriki, Fu could understand that at the very least. Sasuke and Sakura then shush Fu in a bit of surprise. Naruto was likely very serious about his relationship with the foreigner if he'd already revealed his secret to her, though what really perked their ears was the mention of another lost jinchuriki other than Gaara. However, they do not press on this, and instead encourage her that by now Naruto would have cooled off and should be safe to approach. Seemingly all the other girl needed to make her leave for the night, though not before turning and waving to the two with a massive blush and an even bigger smile, as she yells to them that she's happy to have them as her friends, and hopes they can all fight alongside one another again before running off. Sakura calls back with just as much enthusiasm, having not taken long to warm up to Ino's usurper in Naruto's heart, while Sasuke smirks softly and gives a half-hearted two-finger salute as she disappears. He then addresses Sakura and says he is going home to rest. Sakura however stops him by grabbing his hand and inviting him to do so at her home once again, reminding that her parents would be more than happy to host him again. He smiles softly once more and pulls her close to him for a hug, but has to decline this offer. He does, however, sagely respond that he knows she's taking Lady Chiyo and Gaara's death harder than anyone as the team's medic. And as if on cue, Sakura begins to tremble a bit in his arms while trying to wipe her tears onto his vest. After a few minutes of this, she seems to settle herself and breaks from the embrace, looking as if she hadn't just let out all that grief. Though knowing it is best not to pester her love, she simply leans up to kiss his cheek and reminds that her offer is always open. Then, more seriously, she reiterates her intention to continue getting stronger, even bringing up their sensei's earlier idea of reforming Squad 7 as an Anbu cell, and laughing that the idea was even more appealing now before she too departs. With the surge of chakra to his feet, Sasuke also disappears in a swirl of leaves, only to land on the balcony of his apartment and quickly key himself inside. He is quickly greeted by his now pet crow, Sui, as he decides to feed his companion and unwind a bit with a shower and a meal before what comes next. After doing so, he sits on his bed in a meditative and relaxed position as Sui lands on the bed. After receiving his master's nod, the creature turns its head and opens up its other eye to look deep into Sasuke's, causing the activation of the Shisui simulation genjutsu. Once again in this now familiar world, Sasuke greets the ghost of Shisui Uchiha, who returns the kindness and asks what Sasuke would like to do, train or investigate Shisui's memories and collective knowledge again. However, Sasuke responds neither, and instead asks Shisui to look into his mind and help him review today's battle. Granny Chiyo shouldn't have died. Sadly, this is something beyond the genjutsu's capabilities, which causes Sasuke to sigh harshly, and instead asks to be shown Shisui's body flicker technique once again. Meanwhile, back at his and Jiraiya's old apartment that they hadn't yet vacated, Naruto finds himself taking the only catharsis he can at the moment and wrecking the place to vent his frustration. He didn't need some old geezer telling him how weak and pathetic he was after seeing the first of his own kind he'd been able to help taken so brutally. The situation reminded him far too much of the tragedy in the hidden mist that took place during his training trip. As he reaches Jiraiya's temporary bookshelf, which had already been stripped of his father's favorite readings with bad intentions, he is suddenly stopped by said man's hand grabbing his shoulder, Confused, Naruto begins to question this when Jiraiya responds that he's actually a clone, and reminds his son to not be too rough around him as he had something important to talk to him about. Not to mention, he really wanted to use that bookshelf in their new mansion. Naruto jerks away from his father and states that he is in no mood as he attempts to leave, but Jiraiya clone's grip tightens as he reiterates that this is very important. With a sigh, Naruto sits at the miraculously understory table and the clone across from him. Jiraiya begins by stating that he knows what Naruto is going through. He's aware it's cliche and under the circumstances probably something his son doesn't believe, but it is the truth. To him, Gaara was a good kid first and foremost, and the loss of that was a bigger tragedy than the loss of a powerful shinobi or jinchuriki. Secondly, he apologizes for all that was said by Danzo, specifying that he really didn't care what his sensei said to mediate peace for the guy. Next time he crossed a boundary like that, Jiraiya was dousing him in Mount Myoboku oil and making him into a paperweight for his desk. This, at the very least, gets a tired and weak smile from Naruto, who can't help but snicker at the oddly dark yet complex threat. Jiraiya smiles at this small success, but then steels himself and apologizes for something he once told Danzo and the elders in order to receive custody of Naruto. Obviously, Jiraiya nor Sarutobi Sensei viewed Naruto as a weapon or monster, but Naruto scoffs that he didn't need to be told that, and that is nothing to apologize for. Jiraiya then sighs and adds that he also needs to apologize for what he's about to say. Danzo was correct. This causes Naruto's blood to boil, but to his shock, he is unable to voice his discontent, or even move, as the clone reveals that under the table, he has currently formed a ram seal, and that when he grabbed Naruto earlier, he stamped a paralysis seal onto his clothes. He really needed to be calm and listen to everything Jiraiya was about to say. Receiving a few strained blinks in response, the seal is released and Naruto coughs a bit as he is given freedom to breathe, while Jiraiya continues. Naruto was ill-prepared to save the jinchuriki. And to his credit, the 5th Hokage correctly identifies that he is likely a major reason as to why that is the case. In Naruto's quizzical look, Jiraiya elaborates that he should have been a lot stricter with Naruto throughout their training, especially recently with the training trip. That was, after all, the reason for their initial stay in the Leaf, to break him of his bad habit of thinking himself the most special and important little shinobi in all the wide world, and was now the reason for the growing sense of failure he knew his child to be experiencing. However, it had always been his philosophy that Naruto should be allowed as much of a normal childhood and social life as humanly possible. So, over their training trip with Naruto got to go to places he'd never been before, met people he never met before, some of which being fellow jinchuriki who could understand and relate to him better than anyone else in the world could, and even found himself in love. Jiraiya felt it would have been wrong to force the boy to focus on his training more than Naruto himself wanted to. It ended up becoming a training trip more so for him that Naruto just happened to accompany him on. He now realized that he and Grandpa Fukasaku should have forced Naruto into participating in the training for sagehood, and even before that, Jiraiya should have given Naruto the true gift of his Uzumaki lineage. Confused at this, Naruto questions what it is that Jiraiya means. The Hokage responds that starting tomorrow, Naruto will act as his office aide so that he can begin his training in sealing jutsu. Naruto protests this, as the idea of sealing jutsu had never appealed to him, even after seeing the recent developments his father had made with it. However, Jiraiya is adamant to the point that Naruto begins to remember the days of being forced to eat vegetables and brush his teeth when he didn't want to. He hangs his head and is about to solemnly agree to this when a knock at the door interrupts the two. Fu's voice sounds from the other side of it, and Jiraiya looks to his son before stating they'll continue this conversation later and poofs away as Naruto makes a beeline for the door to let Fu inside. She's fairly taken aback by the huge mess, but nonetheless hugs her friend in recognition of the rough experience they both endured. However, she has not come here solely to comfort her friend, as she has even more bad news sadly. She is leaving the Leaf as she has been in contact with Killer Bee and Yugito thanks to Madatabi and Gyuki. Bee has decided that it is finally time to take the fight to the Akatsuki themselves, and is wanting the Master Jinchuriki to team up against them. Naruto is stunned. Back with Sasuke, his training is interrupted by a rapping on his window. It was extremely easy to lose track of time while in Shisui's genjutsu after all, as he'd realized the morning light was beginning to drive out the darkness. On his balcony stood 3 Anbu members. The tallest of the trio pointed up to the roof before they disappeared. Realizing he's currently late, Sasuke hastily puts his gear on and dons his mask as he joins his new team on the roof of his apartment. The tall leader greets him in a pretty chipper tone for a member of the Black Ops and apologizes for coming to his home for their first meeting, as it was usually a rule not to disclose one another's identities like this, but this mission being time sensitive made it a bit of a necessity. He does, however, extend a courtesy of introducing himself as a commanding officer and saying that his name is Tenzo. However, for their mission, Sasuke and his teammates are to refer to him only as Bear. He then indicates for his 2 companions to give their own code names, which Sasuke learns are Scorpion in the case of the shorter black-haired one, and Toad in the case of the taller and seemingly tired silver-haired individual. Bear then decides that Sasuke will be called Crow, since it seemed fairly fitting. The Uchiha nods simply in understanding, and Bear takes the opportunity to review the parameters of the mission as well as ask his new teammates to give a brief rundown of their abilities and weaknesses so they can formulate the best strategy needed to most efficiently capture the spy and make their way back to the village. as well as for Crow to help Bear in getting Sasuke's mannerisms down far better since he was able to use his Sharingan during the entire encounter with him. It is decided that Bear will make contact while posing as Sasuke, since he is the best suited for restraining opponents using wood-style ninjutsu. Then using that as a signal, Crow will zip in and use a genjutsu to render their captive unable to battle anymore, while Toad and Scorpion would have the task of number 1, guarding the area to make sure they have control of it, and number 2, keeping Crow safe until the moment he's needed. Crow argues back against this coddling approach to his first Anbu assignment, and assures Bear he doesn't need a security detail, and suggests that they not waste the energy. However, Bear rebuts that he is fully aware of Crow's capabilities. In spite of that, he isn't willing to place his comrades in danger unnecessarily. Toad and Scorpion have more experience in Black Ops, so it makes sense to have them use it to keep a vital member of the team safe. Crow nods, however, it's clear that he doesn't agree with the sentiment, even though it did remind him of the true will of fire that Kakashi and Jiraiya touted so passionately. Scorpion suddenly speaks up for only the second time, as he asks why Crow would argue with a superior, much less one assigning him extra protection. Naivety such as that seemed like more than enough justification for Sasuke to be babysat. Bear then menacingly grunts at Scorpion to remember protocol, and the other young Anbu member goes quiet without any further pushback. And with that, the squad set off for Tenchi Bridge. Saving the details of this same journey that we saw in canon with the reformed temporary Team Kakashi, Bear's squad only make a single stop as it is to rest for a short time before finishing the last leg of their journey. In interest of stealth above all else, Bear decides not to use the 4-pillar house jutsu in order to conserve valuable chakra, since we later see during the reconstruction of the leaf it is a very taxing technique. This means the squad take to sleeping in the tree, but Sasuke finds it especially hard to rest and watch the back of his eyelids due to the feeling of Scorpion and Toad's gaze on him. At one point, he finally becomes irritated enough to ask what the problem is, only for Scorpion to shush him and remind him of Bear's order to sleep. The two then stare one another down from opposite trees as the Uchiha begins to notice something peculiar about his teammates. Finally, after about 3 hours, and with the morning sun still an hour or so away from rising, the squad arrive at their destination and spend the rest of their time before their mark arrives scoping out the area for any forms of traps or hidden enemies. Once the threat of ambush is eliminated, the squad members take their positions, so it is a very controlled environment that their cloaked mark steps into. As soon as he is sensed, the disguised Bear approaches from the other side of the bridge and slowly makes contact with the enemy. Here, Bear's impersonation of Sasuke is far better than the one Yamato and Kanon was able to pull off. However, he is still thrown off by the realization that the spy is Kabuto Yakushi. Collecting himself, he asks to know what information the silver-haired man had gathered. However, Kabuto apologizes to his true master and states that there has been a development as he pulls his lip down to reveal a strange seal. He then asks if Sasuke is familiar with the root organization of the leaf, explaining that Orochimaru had become a bit paranoid of spies, and so had forged similar seals as those used by the root on the members of his inner circle. Bear, in imitation of Sasuke, states that this means Kabuto is now useless to him, as his tail begins to move from under his cloak menacingly. However, this is the cover as he prepares to ensnare his target in tendrils of wood, but a bad feeling tingles Bear's spine, causing him to pause. Kabuto then continues with the counteroffer to save his life, as he offers the alternative of escorting Sasuke to Orochimaru's current hideout and smuggling him inside so he can do his own spying on the Snake Sonic's current plot. Bear then internally curses as he realizes something is wrong due to seeing no sign of Crow, nor Toad, or Scorpion, seeing that his options are now extremely limited if he wants to actually have this plan go off without a hitch, as well as the possibility that this strange seal on Kabuto could affect the Interrogation Corps' investigation and possibly render the mission a waste of time. He decides to relent and follow Kabuto, on his head, angrily and worriedly wondering what has become of his teammates. A few minutes earlier, concealed in the thick foliage of a tree specially made by Bear for the younger squad members to hide in and wait for the captain's signal, Crow, Toad, and Scorpion sit and wait patiently while having erased their presence as much as possible. But behind Crow's back, his teammates suddenly unsheathe their swords and attempt to cut the Uchiha down, nearly succeeding if not for his apparently preempting this. As suddenly, the two found themselves bound by tendrils of wood as if Bear returned to help. However, this is all Sasuke's doing, as he suddenly comes from the branches above Toad's head before quickly and cleanly swiping at his throat with his own kunai. The imposter assassin falls limp as Sasuke recites the name of the genjutsu technique Kurenai had been gracious enough to teach him as he looks to Scorpion and quickly tears his mask away, revealing the pale, expressionless face of a boy his age. Fully aware that being captured is not an option for a member of the Foundation, the member of the Root searches his chakra not to release himself from the genjutsu, as he expects that it would simply lead to him falling into another one. Instead, he forced a great deal of chakra to surge into Toad, as the entire time the other assassin had been nothing more than a corpse he learned to alter to use a special ninjutsu for the purpose of temporarily reanimating a corpse. Even with his repressed emotions though, it saddened him to finally have to part with his last piece of his found family, as suddenly, Toad leaps from the ground and tackles Sasuke out of the tree. The corpse makes a ram seal as Sasuke struggles to get free of the inhuman strength, but is horrified at the bright light escaping its kunai pouch as he recognizes it is filled to the brim with paper bombs. The forest itself shakes as the root member closes his eyes and says a final silent prayer for his brother, while sending another one to the man he saw as his elder brother and thanks for teaching him such a technique. He is then startled as he feels a hand on his shoulder and looks back with shock to see his lord, Danzo Shimura. The grizzled old shinobi praises his soldier even as the root member sputters out an apology for not harvesting the Uchiha's eyes as he'd been ordered to. However, Danzo dismisses this as being of little importance, before he orders a mission report from the traumatized tool as he frees him from the fake bindings. The nameless child spends the next 10 minutes filling Danzo in on all that had occurred since his departure from the Leaf for his mission to assassinate Sasuke Uchiha, including the sacrifice of his corpse brother and the mention that Kabuto Yakushi had departed with Tenzo and would deliver him to Orochimaru as agreed upon. Danzo then sighs tiredly, before strangely saying that Shimura and his foundation really were despicable. The nameless boy cocks his head in confusion as Danzo suddenly bursts into a flock of crows that disappear from sight as Sasuke's voice sounds out from behind him. Turning, he sees the young Uchiha and Toad's body are safe and sound, as well as the effects of the large explosion having never actually taken place. This was Sasuke's own attempt at a Tsukuyomi. It was extremely costly in chakra and didn't allow him to manipulate the perception of time and space like Itachi's true Tsukuyomi. But with the help of Sakura, Kurenai, Ken, and Ibiki from the interrogation corps, he developed it into a truly devastating information gathering and distraction technique. Recognizing his fault and that he now had no future whatsoever, the nameless child sunk to his knees and feet and begged for death. Sasuke remains silent as he leans against the tree, partially because he needs to recover a bit from using a genjutsu which required his mangekyo, but also due to the gravity of the information he'd just been told. The root was after his head, meaning he was onto something. Remembering the urgency of their current situation, however, he stands and approaches the child before squatting down and tapping his forehead to get his attention. His mercy prevailing over his wrath, he expresses sorrow at hearing of the other boy's loss of a brother and refuses to take his life. He does, however, recognize the situation that he has put Scorpion in by not falling to his blade, and so offers him the chance to flee the village and allow Sasuke to falsely claim his death, as he holds up the Scorpion mask as a form of proof. The fake Anbu member doesn't have a response, as Sasuke suddenly body flickers away, as he still had to help Bear. Moving as fast as he possibly could, Sasuke is forced to take a food pill so as not to burn himself out completely, as he thankfully doesn't have to do any more than follow the subtle trail of twigs that Tenzo had left in his wake, soon coming upon a well-hidden hideout that the Sharingan makes quick work of and allowing him to find a simple and stealthy way inside. He quickly finds the remains of an Akatsuki cloak and wood chunks from the Sasori disguise, before suddenly speeding up even further as he hears the obvious sounds of battle. He arrives at an opening to a large room that sees Tenzo surrounded by dozens of strange-looking people with oddly misformed and misshapen bodies. In the center of the room was a large statue of a snake that, due to the light of the room, cast shadows upon three figures atop it who surveyed the battle. One very obviously the quadruple crossing spy, Kabuto, who wore a demented smirk as he looked at the carnage Tenzo was causing with his powerful wood release, as if it was some new toy for him to play with. The next was someone Sasuke could tell was his age, sporting long shaggy orange hair, and in stark contrast to Kabuto, this person's face was stoic, almost disgusted by the display. And the third is unmistakable, even though he looks vastly different from when they had clashed in the Forest of Death. Orochimaru, seeing that he at least still had the benefit of stealth, and that their mission was likely a bust at this point, Crow seeks only to get his Anbu teammate back to Leaf as he releases targeted Chidori Sinbone which showered down on the strange-looking curse-marked men, causing most to either fall dead themselves or opening them up for a quick execution at the hands of Bear, who then jumps himself up to where Sasuke is and tries to escape the chamber with him. Their path is instantly shut off by a giant and ornate pillar of bone that juts from the ground, trapping them. They prepare to try and blow past it when two serpentine eyes peer from it, and they fearfully leap back and regrettably back into the chamber as Orochimaru creepily slithers from the bone as if some form of disgusting and rotted marrow. Kabuto and the mystery boy then stand behind them to pinch them in, as if they've been planning for this all along. But Orochimaru speaks clearly and calmly, explaining that he seeks no more bloodshed and apparently reiterates some earlier offer to Tenzo to simply negotiate with him, expressing that he is not the same man who once experimented on him without consent. Bear, however, remains silent, and Sasuke follows suit and unsheaths his sword, as the two go back to back. Just as suddenly, a nearly maddening amount of killing intent floods the room for a single second, and causes the two Anbu Black Ops members to be appalled by all the methods of death that the Serpent Sani's hands had suffered before as quickly as it came, the killing intent left. Kabuto then advises the duo to accept Lord Orochimaru's generosity and speak to him, since they'd gone through all this trouble to get them here. Tenzo grunts with disapproval at how bad this is starting to look, when Sasuke demands to know if Danzo, Shimura, and Orochimaru really are working together, and the Snake Sani without hesitation confirms that the two had a past together. However, Shimura's vision was too small in scope for them to be considered partners. They had an arrangement, nothing more and nothing less. Kabuto again quips that he is saddened that the Scorpion and Toad were the ones the Root founder chose to use in this mission, but could see why one would want to make a precise cut with the sharpest tool possible. The boy beside him then grunts for Kabuto to shut up while Lord Kimimaro is speaking, causing the older man to scoff but comply. This time it is Tenzo who relents and asks a question, desiring to know what exactly it is that Orochimaru is aiming for, to which he responds that he simply seeks to add their voices to his hidden sound. But Tenzo shoots back that his sicking his failed experiments on him seem like a poor way to do so. Orochimaru then defends that Tenzo was the one to take action first, and stresses that the corpses on the floor weren't just experiments, but valuable citizens of the hidden sound. And the fact that he and Sasuke still drew breath was a testament to his mercy, as their corpses would be nearly as good a prize for retribution as their allegiance would. Sasuke followed up on this by asking what it was that Danzo was getting out of the agreement, and why the two had teamed up in the first place. However, he gets no new information when Orochimaru simply states that the Leaf Elder wanted Sasuke taken off the board. Orochimaru does, however, suggest that Sasuke is likely making him uncomfortable with his investigation. Tenzo tries to whisper that this doesn't look like one they can get out of very easily, and tells Sasuke to keep the Sani talking while he tries to make a way out. Recent events in mind, the use of the term you instead of we triggers the burning rage in Sasuke to blaze even brighter, as he then asks Orochimaru what he would like them to do. The Sannin gives a small smile and remarks that Sasuke is very much like his brother, which makes matters worse. However, unlike Itachi, Sasuke needs to learn to pick and choose his battles better. A whoosh causes he and Tenzo to quickly move from where they were standing in an attempt to not be crushed by the force of the attack that Jugo sent their way in his mad charge towards them. The floor crumbling away easily to reveal a small tunnel Tenzo had been attempting to dig discreetly as Kabuto also enters the fray. Orochimaru orders his lieutenants not to damage their targets any more than absolutely necessary, but also not to allow themselves to have their lives taken, motivating both as Kabuto sees the challenge of a new perfection to reach, while Jugo only hears a request from someone precious still. Thankfully, though both were very tired, Sasuke and Tenzo found they had amazing chemistry when linking their abilities together. Access to water and earth chakra made it so that any use of either could be easily comboed with Sasuke's various Chidori forms, and wood release and fire release had always been a devastating combination, meaning they hold their own exceptionally well combined with their opponents obviously not aiming to kill if possible. The battle takes a shift, however, when Jugo seems to grow more and more deranged as they continue, with his body growing and morphing to look like a far more dangerous version of the curse-marked men that Tenzo was able to hold off. Kabuto even began to work to supplement the wild and uncontrolled attack of the crazed curse bearer, when suddenly an explosion on the roof forced them all to separate or be crushed by a massive slab of the ceiling, as two giants made of ink landed accompanied by Scorpion. Kabuto then gives a mocking cheer as he addresses the boy as brother and expresses being happy he survived, shocking Sasuke and Tenzo before the emotionless child responds that the term was not something that applied to them any longer, as he regroups with his teammates and apologizes for his lateness as he struggles to make a decision. At the question of what that decision is by Sasuke, the boy responds that he wants to pledge his loyalty to him, causing Tenzo to begin piecing everything together and motivating him to live through this encounter even more. However, that no longer seems possible, as Orochimaru suddenly materializes behind them and the three feel nearly imperceptible pricks at the bases of their necks, as Asani wields a massive spiral bone spear, which strangely morphed at its point into three serpentine bone tendrils that became as thin as needles by the time they reached them. Obviously not meant to kill, but to immobilize, as Orochimaru suggests the three take a long and well-deserved rest as they feel their strength begin to be sapped away rapidly. The world grows darker for them, until suddenly, the bone on Orochimaru's arm begins to collapse in on itself as Asani is forced to rip it off or be sucked into the void along with them, allowing the Anbu to drop to their knees hacking and coughing while yanking the bones out of their necks. Sasuke, recognizing the Kamui, begins to look around for his teacher, and finally sees him upside down at the edge of the hole the Scorpion had created with his single Mangekyo spinning angrily and causing tears of blood to drip into his own hair. Kakashi sighs in relief that he was able to reach them in time after receiving Jiraiya's order, and the Anbu squad wastes no time upon seeing the path to freedom before attempting to leap through it, just as Kabuto and Jugo prepare to intercept them when Orochimaru calmly orders them to let the group go, as he remarks how much joy it brought him to see Tenzo, Kakashi, and Sasuke today, as well as the advancements that they had made in their time apart. He hopes that one day they will join the path that he and the Sound are forging to change the shinobi world, as his arm grows back. Thoroughly unsettled and thankful this hellish mission could finally end, the shinobi of the Leaf Village wastes no time in departing, as Orochimaru returns to his followers and smiles reassuringly, and asks Jugo to gather the others and for Kabuto to salvage whatever he can as they will be moving within the hour. The medic asks if he got the samples he needed, and Orochimaru's smile becomes unconsciously more sinister as he nods and holds his hands out to produce 3 vials of bone that clearly have some form of reddish amber liquid in them. A few miles from the base already, Kakashi and the Anbu finally stop to catch their breath and regroup. Tenzo profusely thanks his senpai as Sasuke grows quiet and rubs the back of his neck to soothe the bad feeling he had. Kakashi waves off the thanks and instead suggests the group begin making their way back to the Land of Fire before turning his attention to Scorpion and suggesting he make himself scarce if he is sincere about escaping the Foundation. Sasuke finally replies that he has a plan for that and promises to keep the nameless boy safe, as well as reasons he'll be needing a name, though this is to be decided during their trip back to the Leaf, as all three of them are physically and emotionally drained. As they depart, Kakashi hangs back and then speaks to the empty forest, saying, "You could have stepped in yourselves, you know," as two Akatsuki-cloaked figures revealed themselves, with the taller of the two remarking that this is no way to speak to old friends. But this plus Ultra fam is where we'll be leaving this story off for right now. Hey guys, please stick around for the end of this one. So I am very aware this part lacks both the length and detail my videos, especially in the series, have come to be known for. Hence, a lot of plot threads not getting the usual time I would give them here in favor of doing so later, and the lack of voice acting. However, with this part having taken so long to get out, I want to prioritize it coming out with some speed rather than continuing the trend which has made it so long between parts. I'm even considering making my editing here extremely minimalist to see how it is received. Not to mention, with part 9 having not performed very well considering all the time and money that went into it, it's beginning to seem like it's not worth all the effort being poured in. Not saying every part will be short, less detailed, and without voice acting, but that only the really special ones will from here on out. So with that out of the way, I would really like to encourage you guys to be sure you are first and foremost subscribed and have at least partial notifications enabled for my channel. Please leave a like and a comment to let me know your thoughts on this approach to the story. I'd also like to give a big shout out to Faison, who did the commissions of the characters of this part, and to Maxi Uchiha 22 for providing all the official character renders. You can find links to their stuff along with my own in the description below. And last but certainly not least, our ever amazing patrons who do so much for the channel and community by supporting me directly, like Crimson Manifesto and Kazekage, our Plus Ultra members who are considered the sponsors of this video. In Hero tier, we have Loma Quaid, Stefan Consfront, and Samuel Viveros. In Shinobi tier, we have Shannon Roberts and Jay Uray. In Z Warrior tier, we have Narku and Normandy 1998. And in Beyond tier, we have Knuckles OX, Pizza 15X, and Don. As always, thank you guys so much for everything you do. Truly, I appreciate you guys so much. But with all that said, you guys know the deal. It's time for me to get out of here. So as always, be sure to take care of yourselves and the world around you. Remember that Black Lives Matter, trans rights are human rights, and considering recent events, I'd like to try this and not make it too cringy. To any Plus Ultra family members who might be Ukrainian or have any family members in the region, Ya z vami Juzi Moyi. I stand with you, my friends. So as always, go beyond, Plus Ultra. And I'll see you guys next time.